I just listened to Stefan Molyneux, the beginning of Stefan Molyneux' video on immigration and Donald Trump, and I'm outraged. So, this decided me to finally make a video to say that, I just hate it when people are lying and being so dishonest and manipulative like this. So I want to warn people so they don't fall for his bullshit like I did. So I'll tell you what happened with me. In late 2008, I read about voluntarism for the first time, and it was a revelation. It's what I had been looking for all my life. I was 43, and finally everything made sense. I'm reading from another screen, that's why I'm not looking directly at the camera, and it sounds like I'm reading. So I started learning about all these new ideas, anarcho-capitalism, the non-aggression principle, Austrian economics, and how what I saw around me was statism. I was very excited. And just then I found his podcast, and all of 2009 and 2010 I listened to, I guess, 200 of them. At the same time as I was listening to audiobooks of Murray Rothbard and Ayn Rand, and other libertarian podcasts like Pork Therapy, School Sucks, and Complete Liberty. I liked Molyneux' audiobooks on anarchy. I thought he explained it clearly, though since I was also listening to Rothbard and Rand, I knew that he hadn't invented any of it. Then I got curious about the psychology he was talking about. I've been reading about psychology my whole life and about brain science because I've always wanted to understand how the mind works. That's how I got into computers. Because of this interest, I figured it was a stepping stone to understanding the mind. I've been writing software for users of Apple computers for more than 30 years now, and that's another thing that helped me see when Molyneux was talking crap, because the things he said about writing software and running a company, those didn't make sense. I'm sure he can't program shit. He's lying about that as well. He talks about it, like people who don't understand it, but want to sound like they do. That's how he talks about it. And the psychology he talks about, he's copying what Alice Miller wrote about decades ago, except he's making it more extreme and misrepresenting it. I hadn't read Alice Miller then, but when I did, this became clear to me. He's also talking about IFS, internal family systems, that the Schwartz brothers developed, and he's talking about it as if he's improved on it, when no, and he doesn't really even understand it. I guess he hasn't applied it to himself. I don't like IFS that much, but I think people who do apply it correctly and consistently can benefit. And it's clear to me that he hasn't, because when you're at peace with yourself, you don't get that angry with people. You're not full of hate when you're at peace with yourself, like he is full of rage. But also he talks about psychotherapy as if he's a master of that. But another thing is he has a podcast or a video. He interviews someone. He was in 2013, and even though Nathaniel Brandon is all about self-esteem, and if you go on Brandon's website, nathanielbrandon.com, there is an article that explains that self-esteem is not the same as walking all over other people. Molyneux in this interview was confusing self-esteem with that, and that just doesn't make sense. if you claim that you're a big fan of Nathaniel Brandon's work and you understand self-esteem, and then you confuse it with something that it's clearly not, then what does that show except that Molyneux is just completely inconsistent, lying, manipulative, and dishonest. Anyways, it's outside of that, what he said made so much sense to me when he was talking about how statism is inconsistent and how it's ruining the world, and how voluntary agreements between people don't lead to all these problems. I was still, back in 2009 and 2010, willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and to consider that maybe I hadn't understood things correctly when I heard him say something that didn't make sense. Listening to podcast after podcast, giving him the benefit of the doubt over and over, and doubting my own understanding over and over, especially since he sounds so sure of what he's saying, I got into the habit of suspending my own judgment and to accept whatever he was saying, as long as it wasn't one of those obvious contradictions. When I heard one of those, like when he was talking about computers or about brain science, then I thought he was making an honest mistake, and a few times I emailed to let him know, but of course I never got any replies. I was already prone to all or nothing thinking, and this became worse after listening to him. You know how he says that if someone isn't consciously against statism, then that means this person wants you shot. I fell for that. Because if you take every step in the reasoning the most extreme way, then you can sort of link those steps and arrive at that conclusion. But in reality, that's not true. I bet no one you know actually wants you shot. Still, he's saying this as though it's true. And if you get frustrated and angry enough with someone, like I did with my ex-wife, when she wanted to send our children to school, when I wanted to keep them out of school, this prison and brainwashing center for children, then you can actually believe that this person doesn't give a shit about you and would approve of you being put in prison and shot if you resist. I had been reading John Holt since 2005, and I had convinced my ex-wife to keep our two children out of school, and instead to give them plenty of time to sleep instead of getting up for school, and to play and read and play in the garden and go for walks and bike rides, go swimming, climb trees, and do lots of activities in clubs such as sailing, judo, archery, gymnastics, track and field, music school. Well, that one I regretted because to me I found out it's more about school than about music. But when they reached the age to go to junior high, where their mom was a teacher, and when I started getting angry with her because I thought she was such a statist and wouldn't listen to my arguments, things got so bad. We went to family therapy together, and that lousy counselor that was there called CPS on me, saying that I was endangering my children. Anyway, I was so righteous. That was true. But I was convinced that Molyneux was right when he said to get all the evil people out of your life. I was so convinced of that I had become an absolute jerk. And everyone in our family paid the price, especially the children who saw their parents yell at each other and eventually separate. I'm not saying this was Molyneux's fault completely. The way I had been raised was a major factor, and I've been busy healing deep childhood wounds. But his influence certainly did not help. It was definitely toxic. Around the time, I also cut contact, around the same time, I also cut contact with everyone else in my family, my mom and my brother and sister, and I also cut contact with my friends. Molyneux says that defu is when you cut contact with abusive parents, but in reality, what he does is push you to see everyone who doesn't agree with what he's saying as corrupt and immoral and radioactive. He says they're evil, and if you want to be moral and help save the world, then you have to cut contact with evil people. And that's what I thought I was doing. And I personally know 7 or 8 people who have done the same thing. And I estimate the total number is in the hundreds. And I'm pretty sad that just seeing what it did to people in my family. So that's why I'm trying to warn others. Because basically he's just acting. I think he doesn't believe any of what he's saying. He used to be all for anarcho-capitalism, anarchy, and now he's supporting the opposite, statism, talking as if democracy could work in this latest video. And now he's supporting a politician, Trump. And also, he claimed to respect children as people, and he has admitted multiple times to bribing his daughter. I don't see how that's compatible if you respect somebody to try to bribe them. There are lots of videos detailing his many contradictions. The TruShibes video do the best job of that, in my opinion. There are mirrors on YouTube and elsewhere. Though the original channel was deleted after Molyneux and his henchmen filed a fraudulent DMCA claim forcing YouTube to remove the channel or face prosecution by the state. How's that for someone who used to rail against statism to file a DMCA claim? He has many videos where he attacks statism and people, like he says, who don't want to talk about the gun in the room. And now he's used this gun himself. Lying, manipulative, dishonest Molyneux. And he even admitted on the Joe Rogan podcast that it was a fraudulent claim because it had nothing to do with copyright. He says, it was to protect listeners, while all TruShibes did was to post excerpts from Molyneux's own videos, which are still online and still have all of those listeners talking like the excerpts in the TruShibes video. He's just dishonest. You can find all the details on fdrliberated.com. I don't agree with everything that they say there, but it's I think a very valuable resource for finding out about all these issues, contradictions, in what Molyneux is saying and how he's been lying over the years and using force against his critics. So I wanted also to talk about how I got out of this. I was depressed and how I reconnected what I learned, nonviolent communication, and how I reconnected with my family and with some of my friends, how I was able to talk with my ex-wife about what happened, and now, even though we're still separated and we'll stay that way, we're on good terms, and that's better for everyone in the family, especially our children. I wanted to explain how I'm working on healing completely from my childhood trauma and on being a good companion to myself and stable support for my son and daughter, but maybe I'll make another video about that if people are interested. So, to conclude, I think Molyneux is profoundly disturbed, and he's a menace to unsuspecting people, especially those interested in the ideas of liberty. In 2012 and 2013, I was on his forum trying to point out the contradictions and get people to see that they were on a path of self-destruction. I tried to talk with him directly, help him see a way out of his pain, because I think he is suffering a lot. He is very scared, and you know, yeah. Anyway, I hope this video helps you not fall into the trap I fell into. Take care.